Hi everyone, this is Patty Minch. I'm a 6th grade science teacher at Reynolds Middle School in the School District of Lancaster, and I'm currently working towards my Master's in Ed in Assessment, Curriculum, and Teaching with a concentration in STEM at Millersville University. The purpose of this action research was to examine the effects of feedback and revision opportunities throughout the engineering design process. Below, I've split that into its two main components. On the left is the engineering design process, which is similar to the scientific method but has a few differences as well. Throughout this project, students worked to engineer a structure that could withstand the effects of an earthquake. To do that, they started by researching the need or problem. Then they moved on to develop possible solutions and select the best solutions. Step 5, which is a hallmark to the engineering design process, they constructed a prototype. From there, they tested and evaluated their solutions, communicated the solutions, and if necessary, they redesigned their prototypes. On the right-hand side, you'll see a quote from Chapuis in 2015 from her book, 7 Strategies of Assessment for Learning. In her book, she writes, "Next step feedback can do one or more of the following. Identify a correction, describe a specific feature of quality that needs work, or point out an ineffective or incorrect use of strategy or process. In addition, it points the way to further action by offering a reminder, making a specific suggestion, or asking a question that opens up a course of action for the student." It's this quote that helped me to build a structure or framework for how I gave students feedback. The research questions that guided this action research project were, what are the effects of intervention feedback on student learning? Intervention feedback and next step feedback are synonymous. And 2, how does the opportunity for a revision affect achievement? In order to highlight some of the research that I reviewed for this project, I've highlighted the conclusions or big takeaways from the articles that I chose to review. Starting on the top left, Folorenzo and James found that the implementation of feedback alone is more effective than not providing students feedback at all. However, the effects can be amplified if students are given time to reflect on that feedback and revise their work. Next, Ackerman, Domeyer, and Gross, 2017, examined how the following 3 factors affected student reactions to feedback. They looked at the amount of feedback, the source of the feedback, and the situational context of feedback, whether or not revision was possible. In other words, what they tried to do was find the sweet spot for feedback. Not too much or too little, make sure that it was from a credible source, whether with peers or a teacher. And lastly, they looked to see the effects on the opportunity to revise. On the top right, McLaren in 2012 did a study in Scotland that found that technology utilized throughout a project provided opportunities for teachers and peers to provide feedback on student work, which prompted innovation and revision on learning. On the bottom left, we see that these researchers found that there is a strong positive association between feedback and pre-grading and final learning outcomes. They discussed that the crucial step in the learning process is the reflection on feedback that is provided to make revisions to learning. These conclusions are supported by Owen, who concludes that by breaking a larger, more comprehensive project into smaller mini-projects and providing students with feedback and the opportunity to revise their work, students were successful working through the process of developing a literature review, which was the larger, more comprehensive project that Owen studied. These 5 studies, in addition to the work done by Chapuis, set a great foundation for the work that I did in my action research project. So let's take a look at what I did and the data that I collected. As I mentioned before, students were in charge of working through the engineering design process to create a structure that could withstand an earthquake. By moving through the engineering design process, I developed rubrics for 4 crucial steps that I felt would be beneficial in finding data regarding student growth. Those steps were Step 2, research the need or problem. Step 3, develop possible solutions. Step 5, construct a prototype. And Step 7, communicate solutions. As students work through each step of the engineering design process, I created checkpoints in which all students had to check in with me, have their work reviewed, receive feedback, reflect on their feedback, and revise their work if they chose. I chose to collect data specifically on steps 2, 3, 5, and 7, just given the nature of the work that students had to do and the type of feedback that was available for these steps. In order to collect quantitative data for these steps, I created rubrics that outline the specific tasks that students had to do. Before providing them with feedback, I scored their work based on that rubric. Then I provided them with some sort of next step feedback, which I recorded on the rubric sheet. Once students had their feedback, they had the opportunity to revise their thinking and revise their work. If they chose to do that, they would bring their work back up to me, and I would revise their score and their rubric based on any improvements or revisions that were made. As you can see on the rubric, the yellow indicates their initial score, the green represents their score after feedback and revision, and under each step, I was sure to record the feedback that I gave them, as well as the evidence of student reflection and learning, or any additional notes that I felt were necessary for my research. Let's take a look at some of the student data that we see. On average, across all of the 4 scored steps, students improved by 1.3 points on average, which is a growth of 32.5% overall. Each of the 4 scored steps, students showed growth after receiving feedback and having time to revise their thinking. In step 2, researching the need or problem, students showed a 20% growth. In step 3, developing possible solutions, students showed 27.5% growth on average. In step 5, constructing a prototype, students showed a growth of 65% on average. And lastly, to communicate solutions, students showed an average growth of 22.5% on that 4-point rubric. As I analyzed this data, I realized 2 important things. First, the higher level thinking steps, which were developing possible solutions and constructing prototypes, asked students to analyze and apply their learning from previous steps, much more than steps 2 or step 7 did. Within these 2 steps, students showed more growth at 27.5% and 65% for steps 3 and 5, respectively. For the steps that required a lower level thinking, such as recall in steps 2 and step 7, students did not show as much growth after feedback and revision. Another thing that was found was that students with an average pre-feedback score of 1.5 points or lower showed 7.5% more growth than their peers that had a higher pre-feedback score. This pattern indicates that feedback aligned with explicit rubrics and targeting individual student needs likely promotes equitable teaching practices, especially for students struggling to show understanding of concepts. Through the use of feedback and opportunities for revision, students who struggled to show understanding of concepts initially were empowered to be successful in this project. Overall, here are 4 big takeaways that I took from this, what I hope to improve as my role as a teacher, and lastly, how I can inform my school and my colleagues. First, providing feedback and allowing students to go back and revise their thinking is an essential tool for teaching and learning. This is a concept that I hope to apply to all of my lesson plans and unit plans from here on out as I structure how my classroom looks and how my students learn. Number 2, the engineering design process is an effective problem-solving method for MYP, which is a Middle Years International Baccalaureate program for design and science units. In our middle school, we're moving towards the Middle Years program model, which includes design. From here on out, as I develop design and science units for MYP, using the engineering design process in conjunction with feedback and allowing students to go back to revise their thinking. I can pass on these strategies to other design and science teachers and teachers across all other content areas in my school. Next, number 3, I found that providing rubrics gives students a pathway for learning and aids in feedback. Rubrics really are the cornerstone of feedback and formative assessment. When students have an understanding of what's expected of them, feedback is more tangible, and the teacher is able to give more effective feedback when everybody in the classroom has a common goal or common idea of the learning goal. Lastly, I found that productive struggle is crucial for growth, and next step feedback guides productive struggle. Throughout this project, students struggled, and it did not always come easily to them. It was important that I allow them to struggle, obviously within certain boundaries, and that I provide feedback for students that were struggling to help empower them to come up with solutions themselves. Thank you all for your support and feedback throughout this project. I hope that the results that I found help to inform your instruction and benefit your students as well.